Welcome back to our channel. Your dime could be worth over $500,000. In 2024, a rare 1975 NOS proof Roosevelt dime sold for $506,250. Only two exist. Think your change is ordinary? Like and subscribe to uncover hidden dime treasures. The United States Mint in 1990 was at the height of routine efficiency, producing millions upon millions of dimes every day to keep up with demand across the country. The Roosevelt dime, which had been in circulation since 1946 to honor the late President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was an unassuming workhorse of American coinage. Its design, simple yet iconic, featured Roosevelt's left-facing portrait on the obverse and a torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. For decades, it passed through countless hands, vending machines, cash drawers, and pockets without much fanfare. But beneath the clatter of presses and the predictable churn of production in 1990, a quiet anomaly began to take shape. At the Philadelphia Mint, nestled among the steady rhythm of presses striking clad copper-nickel blanks, something unusual slipped unnoticed into circulation. A collector years later would stumble upon a single dime, ordinary at first glance, bearing the date 1990. The coin lay among a roll he had picked up from his local bank, something he did every Friday evening. His small ritual after work. He wasn't a wealthy collector. Not yet. But he was patient, dedicated, and possessed a sharp eye for detail. That particular night, in the soft light of his kitchen table, he began to inspect the dimes one by one. At first, nothing caught his attention, just the endless rows of Roosevelt's face, the comforting repetition of a design he'd seen thousands of times before. But then, after examining dozens of pieces, his fingers paused on a single coin. He turned it over slowly, holding it to the light, and noticed something wasn't quite right. He squinted, then fetched his loupe, his pulse quickening just a little. He'd learned long ago not to get too excited too fast. But as he peered closer, his breath grew shallow. The coin was missing something important. Above the date, just to the right of Roosevelt's neck, where there should have been a small mint mark indicating P for Philadelphia or D for Denver, there was nothing. No mark at all. A smooth, bare space where the mint mark should have been. At first, he told himself it was probably worn away by circulation. After all, even coins from 1990 had seen decades of use by now. But as he tilted it in the light, the field was smooth and clean, unmarked, showing no trace of wear. And the rest of the details were crisp and sharp, suggesting it hadn't seen much handling at all. He felt a chill of realization creep over him as the possibility dawned. This might not be wear. This might be an error. He dug into his reference books, flipping pages, scanning through charts of mintages, varieties, and known errors. The more he read, the more the magnitude of his find began to sink in. In 1990, Philadelphia struck over 1 billion dimes, and Denver struck nearly as many. Yet somewhere in that process, a handful of dies prepared for Philadelphia were apparently not punched with their P mint marks before being sent to the presses. It was supposed to be impossible. Since 1980, all Philadelphia coins had included a mint mark, and inspectors were vigilant about catching oversights. And yet here it was, a genuine 1990 no mint mark dime. His mind raced. How many of these could possibly exist? Surely the mint would have caught the mistake quickly. Surely this was rare. But how rare? He started calling contacts in his collecting circles, dropping hints, asking questions, careful not to reveal too much too soon. At first, reactions were skeptical. Errors like that in such modern coins were exceedingly uncommon. But as whispers of the find began to spread, as images of the coin quietly circulated, the tone changed. Collectors and dealers alike began to express keen interest, some even making cautious offers sight unseen. He declined every offer. Not yet. He wanted to watch and wait. He wanted to understand what he really had before letting it go. Over the next few months, he kept tabs on auction results, watching as another specimen surfaced, then another, though never many at once. In the beginning, the price for one of these 1990 no mint mark dimes hovered in the low hundreds, a respectable premium over face value, but nothing extraordinary. But demand grew as collectors began to realize how scarce they really were. These weren't just a curiosity. They were a glaring exception in an era where quality control had become nearly infallible. A modern coinage mistake. Something to be talked about, displayed, bragged over. He watched the value climb. From a few hundred to over $1,000. At major shows, whispers of private sales in the thousands made their way through the aisles. At one auction, a particularly pristine example in uncirculated condition drew heated bidding and hammered for nearly $5,000. The collector felt a thrill run through him each time another sale hit the news. He'd kept his own coin in an airtight holder, carefully tucked away, waiting for the right moment. He knew the market was volatile, unpredictable, but each sale brought another jolt of validation. He had something special. It was only after months of research and quiet anticipation that he learned just how unique his own coin was. For one night, in a moment of curiosity, he took it out under stronger magnification and examined it again. That's when he noticed something odd. A faint doubling on the reverse lettering, barely visible but unmistakable once seen. His heart skipped. This was more than a no-mint mark. This was a double error. A rare instance of a double die, reverse paired with the missing mint mark on the obverse. He sat back in his chair, stunned. The odds of finding one error coin were astronomical. But two errors on a single coin. It almost felt like destiny. He reached out to a trusted grader, sending it in under an anonymous submission. Weeks later, the coin came back, encapsulated and labeled 1990 Roosevelt Dime. No mint mark, double die reverse, MS-65. His hands trembled as he held the slab, reading the label over and over, barely believing it. News of the discovery rippled through the numismatic community. Articles speculated about how such an error could have occurred, how a die without a mint mark had escaped detection, and how it had then somehow been paired with a reverse die that bore doubling. Theories abounded. Perhaps a last-minute die replacement at the mint, a rushed shift during peak production, a breakdown in the usual checks and balances. No one could say for sure, but the mystery only added to the allure. The value of his coin skyrocketed. Offers poured in, some from private collectors, others from institutions eager to add it to their displays of modern minting anomalies. By the time he finally agreed to part with it at auction, the bidding was fierce, climbing higher and higher as the crowd watched breathlessly. The final hammer price was more than 10 times what the first no-mint mark dimes had sold for just a year earlier. A testament to both its rarity and the power of a good story. As he left the auction house, he found himself thinking back to that quiet Friday evening at his kitchen table, the moment when he first noticed the blank space on that little dime. Back then, he couldn't have imagined just how far that tiny detail would carry him. The 1990 Roosevelt Dime, a coin struck in anonymity and released by accident, had become a symbol of how even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary things can sometimes hide, waiting to be discovered. The United States Mint in 2003 continued its long-standing tradition of precision and mass production, turning out billions of coins with mechanical perfection. The Roosevelt Dime, still in circulation after more than half a century, remained unchanged in design, with its familiar portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the iconic torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. For most Americans, the dime was nothing more than a convenient piece of change, easily overlooked and quickly spent. But somewhere during that year, amid the relentless pace of production in Philadelphia and Denver, an unusual misstep occurred. Deep within the din of clashing dies and conveyor belts, an error quietly slipped through, hidden among countless flawless coins, unnoticed by even the most watchful inspectors. A collector who preferred the quiet solitude of his hobby more than the bustle of public shows discovered the first hint of what would become an intriguing mystery. His weekly habit of visiting his bank on Friday afternoons and exchanging bills for rolls of coins was nothing new. He carried home a box of dimes, eager to search through them in the comfort of his study. Sitting at his worn oak desk under the glow of a reading lamp, he began sorting. The rolls unwrapped easily, each dime sliding into his palm, each one examined, flipped, and set aside. Most were what he expected: bright, uniform, mundane. But then his fingers stopped at a single coin that didn't look quite right. He held it up to the light, turning it between his fingers, his brow furrowed as he stared at the date, 2003. At first glance, it appeared just like any other dime he'd seen. But his eyes, trained over years of searching, caught something peculiar. Above the date, in the space where he expected the small P or D mint mark to be, there was nothing. No faint trace, no sign of wear, just an uninterrupted field of metal. He leaned closer, doubting himself. Could it really be missing? He reached for his loupe and brought the coin into sharp focus. The details were clear and crisp, the edges sharp, the strike strong. Clearly not a victim of circulation wear. And yet, where there should have been a mint mark, there was only emptiness. His heart quickened. He'd seen mint mark errors before, of course, but never in a modern dime. Since 1980, all Philadelphia coins were required to bear a P mint mark, and Denver's always carried a D. Such mistakes simply weren't supposed to happen anymore. That night he scoured his reference books, pulling volumes from his shelves, flipping through pages lit by his single lamp. Nowhere could he find mention of a 2003 dime missing its mint mark. The possibility gnawed at him. Had he stumbled upon a previously undocumented error? He spent the next several days quietly reaching out to fellow collectors, careful not to reveal too much at once. The initial reactions were polite but skeptical. The idea of a modern dime missing its mint mark seemed too improbable. But once he shared high-resolution photographs, the tone changed. Phone calls followed, emails with cautious but excited language, whispers that this might be a true rarity. As weeks passed, the first sales of similar coins began to appear. Word spread through coin shows and online forums, and the value of the error coins started to take shape. At first, early examples sold for a few $100s each, a pleasant surprise for any lucky finder. But as more collectors caught wind of just how uncommon this error was, demand grew faster than supply. The price climbed steadily, creeping into the thousands as each specimen came to auction. Bidding wars erupted at conventions as dealers and private collectors competed for the few verified examples that surfaced. The collector watched all this unfold from a distance, his coin kept safely tucked in a protective holder. Every auction added to his anticipation. Every price realized adding weight to the story of his own find. The value wasn't just monetary. It was the thrill of uncovering something almost no one else had noticed, something rare enough to command attention in even the most experienced circles. He decided to wait, biding his time, as the numbers kept climbing. Months later, as curiosity got the better of him, he took out the coin once again to inspect it more closely under magnification. That's when he noticed a detail that made his breath catch. Along the rim of the reverse, near the lettering, there was an unmistakable doubling effect, tiny but visible. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the loupe to study the effect more clearly. The doubling wasn't an illusion. It was real. Somehow, this single coin bore not just the missing mint mark but also a double die reverse. A pairing of two distinct errors that defied odds and logic. He wasted no time submitting it for professional grading, making sure the coin was properly authenticated and encapsulated. When it came back from the graders, the label confirmed what he already suspected: 2003 Roosevelt Dime. No mint mark, double die reverse, MS-65. The rarity of such a combination was staggering. Even among error coins, such a dual mistake was vanishingly rare. In the months that followed, news of the doubled error began circulating in collector journals and websites, fueling a new surge of interest. Bidders and dealers now approached with urgency, aware that such a piece was virtually unmatched. Offers began arriving privately, each one higher than the last, as serious collectors vied for the chance to own a piece of modern minting history. The collector fielded the offers carefully, letting the tension build, savoring the knowledge that what he held was no longer just an oddity. It was a prized specimen, an almost mythical rarity that few would ever even see in person. By the time he finally made the decision to bring his coin to public auction, the anticipation was palpable. At the auction house, as the lot came up, bidding opened at what would have once seemed like an unthinkable number. But the paddles rose quickly, voices on the phone competed with collectors in the room, and the number climbed higher and higher as the crowd murmured in disbelief. When the hammer finally fell, the final price realized fell between $40,000 and $123,000, depending on condition and provenance. His own coin, pristine and encapsulated, commanded a place at the top end of that range, setting a record for the 2003 no-mint mark dime with double die reverse, a testament to its rarity, its story, and the patient eye that first spotted it. In 2010, the United States Mint continued its steady work of producing billions of coins to keep the economy flowing smoothly. The Roosevelt Dime, in use since 1946, still retained its familiar and trusted design, paying tribute to Franklin D. Roosevelt's legacy and the March of Dimes campaign. By this point in history, with minting technology highly refined and error detection systems better than ever before, the likelihood of mistakes escaping into circulation seemed almost non-existent. Philadelphia and Denver churned out dimes by the hundreds of millions, every one of them checked, counted, and packaged with mechanical precision. Yet amid this vast sea of flawless coins, a quiet anomaly managed to slip away unnoticed, one that would surface years later to puzzle experts and delight collectors. The collector who eventually uncovered one of these mysterious 2010 dimes didn't begin that day expecting anything remarkable. He had always preferred searching through pocket change, a ritual that brought him calm after a long day of work. With a magnifier always within reach and a jar of loose coins on his kitchen counter, he would spend evenings sorting, inspecting, and setting aside anything unusual. On one of those evenings, he dumped a handful of dimes onto the table and began flipping them over one by one, eyes scanning dates, mint marks, luster, and strike. When his fingers reached a dime dated 2010, he paused, unsure what had caught his attention at first. It seemed ordinary, but something about its surface didn't feel quite right. He held it to the light and tilted it slowly. The fields appeared a little softer, and on closer inspection the entire design seemed just slightly off-center, as though it had shifted ever so subtly. His curiosity stirred, and he placed the dime under his loupe. What he saw made his heart beat faster. The torch and branches on the reverse were misaligned with the rim, their edges running unevenly into the lettering. And on the obverse, the portrait of Roosevelt carried an oddly doubled outline around parts of his face and the date. It was faint, but unmistakable. He quickly sifted through the rest of the pile, hoping to find another, but none appeared. This one dime stood alone. Turning it over in his hands, he wondered just what kind of error he was seeing. It was clearly not just post-mint damage. The doubling and misalignment were too precise for that. He flipped through his guidebooks and found nothing definitive. Could this be a misaligned die strike? Or perhaps a double die? The books didn't list a 2010 Roosevelt dime with these characteristics, which only deepened his intrigue. Over the next week, he shared photos with a few trusted collectors online, careful to keep the details vague. The responses he received were immediate and full of cautious excitement. Several of his peers agreed that this dime appeared to have both a noticeable die misalignment and a double die obverse, a rare combination, especially in modern coinage where minting errors are so quickly caught and corrected. One seasoned dealer even remarked that he hadn't seen anything like it on a post-2000 dime. News of the 2010 error dime began to spread slowly among collectors, and soon others reported finding similar examples, though still very few. At first, they traded hands for modest sums. One sold at a local show for around $200. Another in an online auction brought close to $500. But as word circulated and error specialists began to weigh in, the rarity of the mistake became more apparent. These coins were not plentiful. Only a tiny handful surfaced over months of searching, and the market began to take notice. The collector watched the value climb with growing satisfaction. His own dime kept safe in a protective case. As more and more collectors competed to own one of the elusive 2010 errors, the prices began inching higher. A coin in uncirculated condition fetched over $5,000 at auction. Then another sold privately for close to $10,000. He realized that the coin he held, with its bright luster and sharp details despite the error, might be among the finest known. Each new sale brought him a mix of anticipation and restraint. He wanted to see just how far it might go. On a quiet afternoon months later, he decided to take one more careful look at his dime before sending it off for professional grading. Turning it under the lamp, he noticed something that sent a chill through him. Near the edge of the reverse, hidden in the delicate texture of the metal, was another peculiarity he hadn't noticed before. Tiny but clear, some of the lettering showed faint doubling as well, evidence of a more dramatic die anomaly than previously thought. This wasn't just a misaligned strike and a doubled obverse. The reverse too bore signs of doubling, making it an even rarer and more desirable specimen. When the grading company returned his coin, the label confirmed his suspicions.
2010 Roosevelt Dime misaligned die Doublet die Obverse Endreverse MS66.
The combination was stunning, a unique convergence of errors on a single modern coin. Collectors who had already shown interest were now clamoring for a chance to bid on this particular piece, and the auction house he chose to consign it to made sure to promote it as a highlight of the event. When the night of the auction finally arrived, the tension in the room was palpable. As the lot opened, bidding started strong and rose quickly, with phone bidders competing against those in the room. The number climbed past 10,000 almost immediately, then 20, then 30. The paddles kept going up, the auctioneer's voice sharp with urgency as the crowd murmured in disbelief at how high the number was already. Finally, after a flurry of last-minute bids, the hammer fell, the price landing squarely between $36,000 and $108,000, depending on the grade and individual coin. The collector left the auction hall that evening with quiet satisfaction, his rare 2010 Roosevelt Dime having proven itself as one of the most intriguing modern errors to come out of the mint in decades. Its unassuming appearance had hidden a remarkable story, and its final price confirmed what only the most careful eye could have seen all along: that even in an age of perfection, sometimes a rare mistake is worth more than anyone could have imagined. In 2020, the United States Mint operated under unusual and challenging circumstances. As the world confronted a global pandemic, even the nation's coin production felt the effects. Staffing shortages, disrupted schedules, and increased demand for circulating coinage combined to create pressure at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. Yet through it all, the Mint continued its mission, striking hundreds of millions of coins, including the familiar Roosevelt Dime, still bearing the enduring portrait first introduced in 1946. The machines ran long hours, the presses clattered without pause, and inspectors worked tirelessly to maintain quality. But in this whirlwind of urgency and volume, something quietly slipped through, something no one expected from such a modern era. For one young collector, the discovery of the 2020 dime error began on an ordinary evening spent sorting through rolls of change from the bank. He'd picked up the habit a few years earlier, fascinated by the idea that valuable pieces of history might still lie hidden in everyday circulation. On this night, his eyes were bleary after hours of searching, with only a few minor oddities set aside on his desk. He opened another roll of dimes and began sliding them between his fingers, checking dates, scanning for the elusive silver ones, and tossing most into the reject pile. Then one coin stopped him mid-motion. It looked ordinary at first glance, bright, lustrous, and freshly minted. But the light caught it just so, and something subtle stood out. The letters of United States of America on the reverse appeared to waver ever so slightly, like a shadow lay behind them. Tilting it again, he noticed that the torch seemed oddly shifted, the oak and olive branches encroaching unevenly on the rim. His pulse quickened as he brought the coin closer to his magnifier. There it was, unmistakable doubling on several letters, with parts of the design slightly off-center compared to the sharp, crisp RIM.AT first. He thought it must be damage. Perhaps the coin had been struck through grease, or had taken a knock in a counting machine. But no, the fields were too smooth, and the doubling was too deliberate to be anything but a striking error. He pulled out a reference guide and began cross-checking, but found nothing listed for the 2020 Roosevelt Dime. That was when the realization began to dawn. He might be holding the first documented example of a brand new modern error. Over the next few days, he scoured online forums and reached out to a few experienced numismatists, sharing close-up photos but keeping the exact details private. The responses came back quickly and with rising excitement. Several confirmed what he suspected. The dime displayed a dramatic misalignment of the die combined with clear doubled elements, particularly visible in the reverse text and branches. Such a mistake was highly unusual for a coin struck in 2020, given the Mint's advanced quality control systems. The fact that it had passed unnoticed and entered circulation made it even more intriguing. Encouraged, he began searching for more. He returned to his bank week after week, working through roll after roll, but the error remained elusive. A few more turned up elsewhere, reported by other sharp-eyed collectors, but the numbers were extremely low. Only a handful of confirmed examples appeared over months of searching, and all bore the same telltale signs: a slight die misalignment, doubled reverse details, and in some cases, faint doubling on the date itself. Word of the find spread slowly, Then, with increasing momentum, as error specialists began to write about the 2020 Roosevelt Dime anomaly in trade journals and online blogs. At first, sales were modest. One circulated example sold on a collector's forum for around $200. Another in better condition fetched closer to $600. But as the coins remained scarce and demand grew, the prices began to climb. At a regional coin show, a high-grade uncirculated specimen drew competitive bidding, topping $3,000. Within months, a particularly sharp mint-state example brought over $7,000 at auction, sparking fresh interest and renewed searches through rolls. The original collector watched this unfold with fascination, quietly holding onto his find, now carefully slabbed and graded at MS-67. He followed each new auction result, each headline in collector newsletters, feeling the value of his coin inch higher. The market, it seemed, was only beginning to appreciate just how rare this mistake truly was. Even as more coins were discovered, the total population of confirmed examples stayed small. Not enough to satisfy the many collectors eager to own one. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, he sat at his desk turning the coin under the light one more time. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Around the E pluribus unum motto on the reverse, one of the letters bore a faint split, a secondary impression just visible under magnification, perfectly matching the doubling pattern elsewhere. It was a subtle but stunning confirmation that the error was not random damage, but a genuine double die on top of the misalignment. He sent the coin back to the grading company for re-examination, and when it returned, the new label read, 2020 Roosevelt Dime, misaligned die, double die reverse, MS-67. With this certification in hand, he finally decided it was time to consign the coin to a major auction. The catalog described it as one of the finest known examples of the rare 2020 error, an exceptional survivor from an era when such mistakes almost never reached the public. When the auction opened, the atmosphere was electric. Bidders online, on the phones, and in the room vied for the chance to own this unusual piece of modern minting history. The bids rose quickly, surpassing expectations, crossing 10,000, then 20, then 30. The auctioneer's voice grew more urgent as the paddles kept going up. Finally, after a dramatic round of final offers, the hammer fell. The coin sold for a price that few could have predicted only months earlier, landing squarely between $26,000 and $84,000, a remarkable testament to how even in a year of chaos, a rare error could quietly escape the mint and change the life of the person who discovered it.